The snow was falling heavy that morning, thick, wet flakes that turned the trail into a ribbon of white silence. Bo Maddox swung his axe into the pine trunk, breath fogging in the cold, steady rhythm echoing through the forest. He didn't notice the girl at first, not until his dog, a mutt named Dusty, let out a strange, low growl, not a threat, but a warning. Then he saw her, half collapsed at the tree line, wrapped in a coat too thin for the storm, mud on her boots, hands trembling as she held her belly. She was pregnant, and she was alone. Bo dropped the axe. "Ma'am?" His voice was low, wary but calm. The girl lifted her face. She was no older than 20, maybe less. Her lips were blue, and fear sat in her eyes like something permanent.
"Please," she whispered. "I just need a place for the night. Just till morning."
Bo didn't ask questions. Not yet. "Cabin's that way," he said, already pulling off his coat. "Can you walk?" She nodded, then winced. He stepped forward, not to carry her, but to steady her, to give her choice. She gripped his arm, and they walked together toward the smoke curling above the trees. Inside, the warmth hit her like a wave. Bo stoked the fire higher, threw on extra logs, and brought her a mug of hot water with wild mint. She drank slowly, her fingers twitching around the handle. "You in some kind of trouble?" he asked after a while. She didn't answer at first. Then, "My name's Liddy." He waited. She looked up. "I ran." Bo nodded once. Not approval, not judgment, just a man listening. "From who?" he asked gently. Liddy's voice cracked. "A man who thinks I belong to him." Later that night, after she'd fallen asleep by the hearth, Bo sat in his chair and stared at the flames. He didn't know her story yet. Didn't know why her face looked like it had forgotten how to smile, or what kind of man made a pregnant girl run barefoot through the pines. But he knew this. He'd seen lost things before, and he wasn't about to let another one freeze in the dark. Morning came with the kind of silence only snow could bring, soft, smothering, and pure. The fire had burned low, but the cabin held its warmth, and Liddy hadn't stirred from the bundle of quilts Bo had wrapped around her. He sat by the stove, sipping black coffee, watching the sun stretch through frosted windows. He didn't want to ask, didn't want to push, but the truth had a way of finding its way in, especially out here, where there was nowhere to run from it. Liddy woke with a start, hands going instantly to her belly. Then she relaxed, remembering. The cabin, the woodsman, the dog curled near her feet. "I slept," she said, almost surprised. Bo nodded. "You needed it." She sat up slowly. "I'll leave as soon as I can. You'll stay until you're strong enough to walk without wincing." A pause. "You don't even know me." "You're right," Bo said, taking a sip. "But I saw enough yesterday to know leaving you out there would have been wrong." Liddy watched him. "You're not like the men where I came from." Bo raised an eyebrow. "I'll take that as a compliment." Later, as she peeled potatoes with stiff fingers, Liddy finally spoke the name that had been burning behind her silence. "His name is Elias Wexley." Bo's knife stopped against the cutting board. He knew that name. Everyone in 3 counties did. Wexley wasn't just rich. He was powerful. Land, cattle, men with guns, politicians in his pocket. A name whispered in bars and saloons like it might curse your luck if you said it too loud. "He paid for the baby," Liddy said, her voice barely a breath. "Not the way folks think, but in his mind, it was a transaction. He gave my mama a loan. Then when she couldn't repay, he came for me." Bo clenched his jaw. "And you ran." "I couldn't raise a child in that house. I couldn't be his possession." She was crying now, but not weak, not begging, just telling the truth with her chin high, like someone finally speaking after being silent for too long. Bo didn't offer pity, just a quiet, firm nod. "You're safe here, Liddy." "For how long?" "As long as you want." But both of them knew the truth. A man like Elias Wexley didn't forget, and he didn't let go. 3 days passed, each colder than the last. Bo split firewood with precise swings, keeping one eye on the trail that wound down the mountain. He told himself it was for safety, but deep down, he knew what he was watching for. Liddy spent her time quietly, helping where she could. She cleaned, stirred pots of soup, and mended Bo's worn shirts with surprisingly skilled hands. She never asked for more than a corner by the fire and a little space to breathe. Sometimes Bo caught her talking to the baby, whispering promises he couldn't hear. Those moments did something to him. He wasn't a man who thought much about family. He'd buried too many memories for that. But the sound of her voice, soft, brave, laced with hope despite everything, it reached somewhere deeper than he wanted to admit. The knock on the door came at dusk. Firm. Too firm. Bo's hand went to the axe near the hearth. Dusty barked once, then growled. Liddy froze. Bo opened the door just wide enough to see the man standing outside. He was tall, clean-shaven, and wore a fine black coat lined with fur. Behind him, a horse pawed at the snow impatiently. "You Bo Maddox?" the man asked, voice clipped like he was used to giving orders. "I am. I've come on behalf of Mr. Elias Wexley. We understand you're harboring a woman who doesn't belong to you." Bo didn't flinch. "That woman is a free soul. No one owns her. She ran out on a debt. Mr. Wexley's been generous about it, but he won't tolerate theft of property." Bo stepped out, letting the door shut behind him. He stood taller than most realized. Broad, solid, and carved from the same wood he chopped every day. "You tell Elias," he said slowly, "that if he wants to come up this mountain, he better bring something stronger than hired mouths." The man smirked. "Is that a threat?" "No," Bo said. "That's a warning. There's a difference." The rider stared at him for a long beat. Then he turned, mounted, and disappeared into the white. Inside, Liddy hadn't moved. "I heard him," she said. Her voice shook. "I heard his name." Bo sat beside her. Not close, but close enough. "I'll protect you." Her eyes met his. "No one's ever said that to me before." He didn't answer. He didn't need to, because in the silence that followed, she believed him. The next morning, Bo rose before dawn. He wasn't a man who planned for war, but he knew how to prepare for a storm, and this one wasn't coming from the sky. He checked the traps, repaired the hinges on the doors, moved extra wood closer to the porch. Then he saddled his mule and rode 2 hours to a nearby trapper's cabin, an old friend who owed him favors and knew how to keep quiet. When Bo returned, Liddy was tending to stew on the stove. She looked at him, eyes questioning, but didn't speak until the mule was stabled and the cabin door latched. "You think he'll come himself?" she asked. Bo didn't answer right away. Then he set a box on the table. Inside, old shotgun shells, wrapped twine, and a folded map marked with trails no outsider could easily follow. "I think men like Elias Wexley don't like to get their boots dirty, but they'll send others, and next time they won't knock." Liddy's hands stilled. "You could turn me out. Say you never saw me. You owe me nothing." "I don't measure things in debt," Bo said, "and I won't be bullied by men who think money makes them gods." That night, she sat beside him on the porch, wrapped in his old wool blanket, belly resting against her knees. The wind howled low through the trees, but she felt steadier now, as if Bo's quiet presence made the whole mountain a little less cold. "You live so far from everyone," she said. He nodded. "Why?" Bo stared out into the trees, then softly. "My brother didn't come back from the war. My parents blamed me. I stopped trying to explain, and folks stopped asking me to." She looked at him, eyes wide and honest. "So you came out here to disappear?" "No," Bo said. "I came here to stop being someone I wasn't." Liddy smiled faintly. "You're a good man, Bo Maddox." He didn't smile back, but he didn't look away either. And that meant something. Later that night, when she finally lay down, Liddy whispered into the quiet, "Please let him be wrong. Let love be real just once." And outside, under a blanket of stars and pine, the wind didn't answer. But the cabin didn't creak. It held, like a promise. The next 2 weeks passed like a held breath. Liddy stayed indoors, her body growing heavier with the baby's weight, but her steps steadier. She started to hum when she stirred the stew, to smile softly when Dusty rested his head on her lap. Sometimes she even laughed, quiet, surprised, as if she'd forgotten she knew how. Bo noticed every shift. He didn't say much, but he fixed the broken porch rail, lined the chimney stones tighter, and carved a wooden cradle in the evenings without telling her why. He didn't need to. Liddy knew. She saw it in the way he added wild mint to her tea without asking, in the way he stood at the edge of the woods every evening, scanning the hills like a sentinel. She saw it in the way he never asked what would happen when the snow melted, because maybe, just maybe, he didn't want her to leave. But peace never stayed long where power felt threatened. One night, just past midnight, Bo was awakened by Dusty's growl again, low, sharp, and certain. He was already at his window when the fire flared up in the tree line. A torch. Then 2. Then 5. Men, mounted, not Wexley himself, but his reach. They didn't yell or shoot. They just stood beyond the clearing, showing they knew where the cabin was, and that they could return. A message. Bo didn't wake Liddy, not yet. He stood out on the porch, arms crossed, shotgun resting against the wall, just watching, just waiting. After a long moment, the riders turned and vanished back into the dark like ghosts. At sunrise, Liddy found Bo splitting wood like nothing had happened, but his eyes were different, harder, quieter. "They know," he said before she asked. She wrapped the blanket tighter around her. "You should let me go." "No," he said firmly. "They don't want you. They want to prove no one tells them no. Then you'll be in danger." He looked at her, really looked, Danger's been here a long time. You just gave me a reason to stand against it. That evening, Bo pulled out a locked chest from beneath the floorboards. Inside, 2 rifles, 1 revolver, a tin box of cartridges, and a folded army discharge paper with his name at the bottom. Liddy read the look in his eyes. You were a soldier. I was, he said quietly. And I left that life behind. She touched his arm. But you didn't leave behind the kind of man who protects what matters. Outside, the trees swayed, but the roots held. And in that little cabin, 2 people who were never meant to meet were slowly becoming everything each other needed, even if the world beyond the mountain had other plans. The next morning, the air smelled wrong. It was faint, but Bo knew it immediately. Not just pine smoke or morning fog. This was ash. Fresh. He was already outside before Liddy finished her tea, rifle slung across his back, Dusty close behind. Up on the ridgeline, he saw it, a column of smoke curling skyward. Not near, but not far enough either. A burn warning, a message. Someone was torching the forest on purpose. Liddy stood on the porch, clutching her shawl tight around her shoulders. Is it them? Bo didn't answer. He didn't need to. He just stared out toward the trees and said, They're getting reckless. That evening, he set to work reinforcing the cabin, sealing cracks, reinforcing the door with an extra crossbar, loading every cartridge he owned. Liddy watched from the table, hands folded over her belly, eyes full of questions she hadn't dared speak until now. If something happens to you, she began, what do I do? Bo shook his head. We're not thinking like that. But we have to, she said softly, because I can't run anymore, and I won't let my child be born into fear. He turned then, stepped toward her, kneeling slightly so he could look her in the eye, man to woman, not protector to rescued, not soldier to civilian. Liddy, he said gently, you're not running now. And you're not alone. She blinked away tears. You say that like it's simple. It is, he replied. Because choosing to stand beside someone, that's never been hard for me. Not when it's you. That night she couldn't sleep. She walked to the door, pulled on Bo's flannel coat, and stepped outside into the moonlight. The forest was still. Too still. And in the far distance, barely a flicker, a tiny flame danced and vanished on the horizon. A whisper of war to come. She pressed a hand to her belly. We'll be okay, she whispered, more prayer than promise. He's not fighting alone. Inside the cabin, Bo lay awake too, listening, thinking, and for the first time in years, fearing not what he might lose, but what he finally stood to keep. 3 days passed. No riders, no torches, no smoke, just silence. But it wasn't peace, it was waiting. That kind of quiet that comes before something breaks. Then one morning just before dawn, a letter appeared, nailed to the cabin door. No one heard the rider come. No one saw him leave. But the message was plain. Return what belongs to Mr. Wexley by week's end, or every tree you hide behind will burn. C.G. Bo tore it down without a word. Liddy read it in his eyes before he even spoke. They're coming, she whispered. He nodded. They don't care about you anymore. They want control. They want to prove the mountain won't protect anyone from them. But it's not about me, not anymore, is it? She asked softly. No, Bo said. It is about what you represent. Freedom. Choice. A woman saying no to a powerful man and still surviving. That afternoon, Bo rode out, alone, down the mountain to an old sawmill where rough men traded in quiet loyalty. He returned with crates, ammunition, canned food, a second rifle, and something else. Hope. Liddy was waiting on the porch when he returned, her cheeks red from the wind, hands resting gently on her belly. You came back, she said as if she half doubted he would. Bo dismounted and handed her the package he'd wrapped in oilskin. Inside was a carved pendant, simple, shaped like a pine tree with her initials on the back. For you and the baby, he said. In case we get separated. Her fingers tightened around it. You think I'll ever take this off? No, Bo said. I'm counting on it. That evening, as the sun dipped low and the world turned golden behind the tree line, Liddy stood at the edge of the clearing. She reached down and placed the pendant gently against her belly. I don't know what tomorrow brings, she whispered to the child within her. But I know this. The man inside that cabin, he's not just protecting us. She paused. He's becoming ours. And in the shadows beyond the trees, a scout watched them and smiled. Because the war wasn't over. It was just beginning. Snow fell that night, silent, thick, and slow, coating the world in a softness that didn't match the tension humming beneath it. Bo sat at the window, rifle in his lap, every sense awake. Liddy slept in the back room, finally too tired to argue. The baby kicked often now, like it sensed the world was holding its breath. Then, just past midnight, Dusty growled. Low, deep, not a warning this time, a sign. Bo moved like instinct, slipping out the back door and into the woods. His boots didn't crunch on snow. He'd learned long ago how to walk like a shadow, and then he saw it. 3 riders, no torches this time, no message nailed to a door. Just guns. He waited. Let them come closer. Then whistled, a short, sharp burst, a signal. From the ridge above, 2 of Bo's old friends, Ephraim and Josiah, stood up from where they'd been hiding behind rocks, rifles ready. They weren't killers, but they were men who remembered the war and what it felt like when someone drew a line in the dirt and dared you to cross it. The first shot wasn't fired. It was called off. The riders froze as soon as the whistle echoed. Then one of them, young, barely more than a boy, shouted, "We didn't come to fight, we came to warn you!" Bo stepped out from the trees, rifle lowered but not dropped. "Talk." "Wexley's bringing a dozen more," the boy said. "Day after tomorrow. He's calling in favors. Paying bounty hunters, not ranchers. They won't talk. They'll burn and bury." "Then why tell me?" Bo asked. The boy looked down. "Because my sister was like her. Wexley ruined her. We thought she was a liar. Turns out, she was the only one telling the truth." Back at the cabin, Liddy waited on the porch, hands clutched around her pendant. Bo climbed the steps slowly. "What now?" she asked. He looked at her, tired, steady, unwavering. "Now we make a choice." She blinked. "What kind?" He placed a hand on the doorframe like it was the edge of a world. "We can keep hiding. Or we can gather those who've been hurt like you. Like that boy's sister. Like the people too afraid to speak." He met her gaze. "And we show Elias Wexley that justice doesn't always wear a badge. Sometimes it wears flannel and scars." Liddy placed her hand over his. And for the first time in her life, she didn't feel like something broken needing shelter. She felt like a woman about to fight back. By morning, the mountain wasn't quiet anymore. Word spread faster than fire through dry grass. First to the trappers Bo had traded with for years. Then to a nearby Lakota family whose daughter had once been run off her land by one of Wexley's men. And then to the townsfolk, those who didn't wear Wexley's silver in their coat pockets. They came not with rifles at first, but with food, blankets, messages, and memories. "Is it true?" one woman asked Liddy gently. "That you ran from him? And that man in there took you in?" Liddy nodded. "He didn't ask who I was, he asked if I was cold." The woman reached into her basket and handed her a pair of knitted socks. "Then I believe you." By the end of that day, there were 7 men and women on the ridge. By nightfall, 12. Elias Wexley may have ruled the valley below, but up here in the trees, where truth couldn't be bought and silence wasn't loyalty, something was building. A different kind of army. An honest one. Inside the cabin, Bo sat at the table with Liddy, maps spread before them. He marked off trails, weak points, where scouts could hide. "This is madness," she whispered, though not in fear, more in awe. Bo shrugged. "Maybe. But you're not doing this for me anymore, are you?" He looked up. "I started for you. Then, after a long moment, now I'm doing it because I remember what it's like to feel powerless. And I'm done letting men like Wexley write the rules." That night, Liddy went into labor. It came suddenly, with sharp pain that buckled her knees and a rush of breath that emptied her lungs. She gritted her teeth, clutching the doorway. "It's time," she gasped. Bo didn't panic. He lifted her like she weighed nothing and carried her to the bed. Outside, the wind rose. Inside, a fire blazed. And through it all, a new life arrived. Just as gunmetal clouds gathered on the horizon. A daughter. Tiny, fierce, loud enough to cry against the world. Bo held her gently and placed her in Liddy's arms. "She's strong," he whispered. "She was born in the middle of a war," Liddy replied, smiling weakly. She had to be. And beyond the clearing, Elias Wexley was already riding, unaware that what waited for him wasn't just a woodsman and a woman, but a family, and a mountain that had finally woken up. The morning of the final standoff came with fog, thick as wool and heavy with tension. Wexley's men approached from the south ridge, 14 riders, all armed, eyes hard with coin-fed loyalty. Wexley himself rode at the center, dressed like a general, not a rancher, his silver-tipped cane resting across his saddle like it had never touched dirt. He didn't expect resistance. He expected fear. Instead, he found firewood barricades, men and women lining the tree line, and a woodsman standing tall in the clearing, rifle strapped across his chest. And beside Bo Maddox, Liddy, hair pulled back, face pale but resolute. Her newborn daughter wrapped against her chest, a pendant carved from pine resting just above the baby's heart. "You're trespassing," Bo called. Wexley smirked. "I'm reclaiming what's mine." "She was never yours," Liddy said, voice steady. "And neither is this land, or these people." One of the riders flinched. Another lowered his gaze. It was subtle, but Wexley saw it. And he hated it. You think these backwoods traders will keep you safe? He sneered. I'll buy every inch of this mountain. I'll dig up your house by the roots. Bo stepped forward. Then you better be ready to pay in blood because we're not running. A silence fell. Cold, absolute. Then a voice from the woods, an old trapper, called out, We ain't paid to lie down, Wexley. We're paid in decency now. Another, You don't own fear here anymore. A woman from town. You made us feel small, not anymore. Wexley's hand twitched toward his pistol. But before he could draw, a single shot cracked the air. Not aimed to kill, aimed to warn. It shattered a pine branch over his shoulder. He froze. His men looked around, unsure now, uncertain. The spell of his power was cracking. Then they turned. One by one, his hired guns began to retreat, not out of cowardice, out of recognition that this fight, it wasn't about money anymore. It was about right. And Wexley was on the wrong side. Bo lowered his rifle. Wexley sat alone now, trembling with rage and disbelief. You think this is over? He hissed. Liddy stepped forward. It already is. Then she turned and walked back into the cabin, holding her child, holding her future. That evening the mountain was quiet again. But this time, it wasn't waiting. It was resting. Bo chopped wood while Liddy rocked the baby to sleep on the porch. Her cheeks glowed in the firelight, her eyes softer now, lighter. Do you think he'll come back? She asked. Bo looked toward the stars. He might, he said, but he won't find the same people. She smiled. You mean he'll find a family? He turned to her. No, he said, stepping close. He'll find my family. And somewhere in the woods behind them, the wind moved gently through the trees, carrying the sound of a new name being spoken. Not in fear, not in shame, but in love. Spring had come early to the mountain that year. The snow had melted into wildflowers, and the old trail Bo once walked with an axe over his shoulder now led to something more permanent. A house with a real roof, a smokehouse out back, and laughter inside. A little girl with dark curls and fearless eyes ran barefoot through the grass, chasing Dusty, now grayer but still as loyal. She giggled when the dog barked and spun, then ran straight into her mother's arms. Liddy scooped her up with ease. Her face had changed, not in age, but in peace. The lines around her eyes were no longer drawn by fear, but softened by joy. From the garden, Bo looked on, wiping sweat from his brow. You planning to replant the whole mountain? Liddy teased. He grinned. Figured if I start now, I might have it done before she's old enough to marry. She's only 3. Exactly, Bo said with a wink. Time flies. That evening, as the sun melted over the ridgeline and painted the trees gold, the family sat on the porch together. The little girl, whom they named Wren, sat between them, holding a carved pendant in her tiny hands. The one that kept me safe, she said proudly. Liddy nodded. It did more than that, baby. It helped you find us. Bo looked out at the horizon. Funny thing about war, he murmured. Sometimes it tears things apart. But sometimes it clears the way for what was always meant to be. Wren yawned and leaned her head against his arm. Tell me the story again, she said softly. Which one? Bo asked. The one where Mama was brave. Liddy laughed gently. Bo looked at his wife, eyes full of everything words couldn't say. Then he began like he always did. There once was a girl who said no to the wrong man and yes to her own heart. And that's how a mountain remembered how to stand. And far below, in a town that had long since turned its back on silver and silence, Elias Wexley's name was rarely spoken. But in the pines, among the roots, and in the hearts of those who stayed, Liddy's name still echoed, because she didn't just survive. She built something no power could burn down, a home, a family, and a love that held, like trees in the storm.